No. It's not.
Now it is.
Now you got it.
Welcome back.
Thank you. First on the agenda this evening is a presentation, Alternative Water Source Program, Allison Swisher, Public Utilities Director, and Gary Davidson, Environmental Commission Chairman. Mayor, Council, good evening. Tonight, we are here to present a culmination of the past 18 months, which was a study which will culminate tonight with a recommendation for an alternative water source for the city of Joliet and potentially the region. Also present on a strategic plan on how to implement that recommendation. So first, let's start at the beginning of the story, our current problem. So modeling conducted by the Illinois State Water Survey, completed in the fall of 2018, has shown that the existing water source, the deep groundwater aquifer, will no longer be able to meet the city's maximum days by 2030. So switching to an alternative water source is not an option. It is something that is necessary and something that we must do in the foreseeable future. To begin, we conducted a study that took a fresh look at all of the possible alternatives, utilizing engineering best practices by a team of subject matter experts in an open and transparent process under the guidance of the Environmental Commission. Using this process, we were able to meet the study goals of evaluating the alternative water sources for total cost and other non-cost considerations. The study was conducted in 2 phases. The first phase was completed in January of 2019, and this evaluated 14 alternative water sources for water quality and quantity. From there, we narrowed that down to 5 sources and completed phase 2 in November of 2019, and that evaluated the 5 alternatives listed for cost as well as additional factors. So it's important to look at the non-cost decision factors, and we've been talking about these a lot through the various workshops that we've conducted. The first one is raw water quality. How does the quality of the raw water impact the ability and cost associated with treatment? Next, we looked at water quantity. Is there enough water for the city of Joliet and potentially the region now and also in the future? Implementation risk. Will the alternative be easy to implement considering permitting, scheduling, and project complexity? Next, we looked at operations and maintenance. How significant are the O&M responsibilities for the city once construction is complete? And lastly, we looked at control. Does the city maintain complete control of our water source? Next, we looked at cost. As we've discussed, cost is much more complex than just the cost of constructing the improvements. When you look at the total cost of water, you have to look at all of these factors that are on the screen. You have to look at the financing costs, the O&M costs, and the water supply costs, in addition to those capital improvement costs. And this is something that we then combined all these decision criteria into a weighted decision matrix, which was presented to the public and the council and the Environmental Commission in November. And that weighted decision matrix combined all those factors to help you with making this very important decision. The phase 2 study was conducted very transparently and utilized a lot of stakeholder engagement. There were 3 joint workshops conducted between the City Council and the Environmental Commission in April, July, and November of this past year. We held monthly Environmental Commission meetings, which were open to the public. There were monthly education topics that were distributed to decision makers as well as posted on the project-specific website. We attended numerous local community events and also did numerous presentations at community and neighborhood association meetings. We've had a significant campaign, a public awareness campaign, utilizing the city's billboards, e-blasts, social media, as well as newsletters and mailings. We conducted a community survey to identify the existing knowledge of our residents regarding this issue. And then lastly, we conducted the public forum on December 5th and obtained public comments, and also prepared and distributed 3 question and answer documents. So overall, we received 53 comments from the public, which were distributed to the commission and the city council. And we also answered over 30 questions from various sources. So the Phase 2 study report was presented at the November 13th joint workshop. At that meeting, staff provided their recommendation, and these are listed in no particular order. They were the Illinois River, Lake Michigan Water, New Indiana Intake, Lake Michigan Water, Chicago Department of Water Management. Now I'm going to turn it over to Gary Davidson, who is chairman of the city's Environmental Commission, and he'll present the Environmental Commission's recommendation.
Thank you, Allison. Mr. Mayor, Council. This process actually started a little over 2 years ago, thanks to this council and the mayor, who revitalized an older committee that used to be referred to as the Water and Refuse Committee. That committee was from the 60s and 70s. Now we've transformed that into an Environmental Commission because obviously in 2020, environment, sustainability are much more on the forefront of our minds. So I think it's really important for the public and for the commission to understand, and for the council to understand, that this has been a very, very deep dive. It's been a very, very lengthy process. We started this with Jim Egan before his retirement, and we've spent literally hundreds and hundreds of hours. I know we have a few of our commission members here that I'd like to acknowledge: Maria Rafak, Wayne Horn. I think if there's anybody else here that decided that they wanted to come and see this through. And obviously, we've been had a great deal of assistance from what I'll refer to as our engineering nerds. And those are, you can probably identify them. They're sitting in the second row. But no, they've been instrumental in helping us get to this point. And as Allison had mentioned, there were things that this council and the mayor charged us with, and looking at this from a multi-pronged approach. That being the sustainability. We wanted something that could service the city of Joliet and surrounding communities, not just for the next 10 years, not just for the next 20 years, for the next 100, the next 200 years. So no short-term solutions. The availability of those resources. And as we started looking at the availability and sustainability, certain alternatives began to easily fall from the spectrum just because they weren't actually accessible or could provide that sustainability. Quality. The quality of delivery of water to the citizens of Joliet was extremely important to the commission in giving this recommendation to you. What control? And obviously you as the politicians, the decision makers, you're the ones that have to determine what amount of control you want to have versus some sort of public-private partnership or another pre-existing community that might be able to service water. So all of those things came into account. We obviously had joint meetings with you, and after looking at all of these things, it became very, very clear to the commission that the selection of Lake Michigan water was the solution that we wanted to propose for you to consider. And we believe it's the best alternative. So there were two motions that were made in December at our meeting. Motion one was to say, Council, Mayor, we believe that Lake Michigan is the best alternative for the city of Joliet from a sustainability perspective, from a quality perspective, and from a control perspective, and from availability perspective. Motion two that was before that board was, what exactly from Lake Michigan would those alternatives be? And from that, we wanted to give you what we believe to be the A or B, or perhaps they're not mutually exclusive, but these are the best of the Lake Michigan options according to the commission. And that primary recommendation would be Lake Michigan water with a new Indiana intake. Now that would provide the city of Joliet with both sustainability and with quality, Lake Michigan being the largest source in the world of fresh water, which is not very far away, but also the opportunity for the city of Joliet to be a forefront leader in delivering the control to have a regional solution and be a regional partner to other communities in delivery of water to the citizens of Joliet and surrounding communities. And as a secondary alternative, a partnership with Lake Michigan Water with the Chicago Department of Water Management. In the event that this council were to determine that after you do your further dive into the finances of this, that it's not financially within the means of the city of Joliet to tackle, if we can't pull off an Indiana intake, that some sort of a relationship directly with the city of Chicago, who already has that infrastructure in place, would be best. So those were the three motions that were before the commission. Those were the motions that were voted on, and that is the recommendation of our commission. And we thank you very much for your faith in us. I know that there were lots and lots of hours spent on this, and every single member of the commission did a fantastic job, so thank you for your appointment.
Thank you.
Thanks to the commission.
Yes.
I just want to go into a little bit more detail on the alternatives that Chairman Davidson mentioned. Again, the primary alternative would be a new intake in Indiana into Lake Michigan. And so this project would consist of constructing a new raw water intake into Lake Michigan, pumping facilities, transmission mains to bring the raw water to Joliet, and then treatment and distribution of that water throughout the existing system. Construction costs conceptually for this option range from $900 million to $1.1 billion, depending upon the capacity. The anticipated average monthly bill increase would range from $67.66 to $55.67, again, depending on the capacity. As Chairman Davidson mentioned, the key considerations for this program include the high-quality raw water that we would obtain from Lake Michigan, the complete control we would have over the water rates and implementation, as well as the sustainable water quantity to serve Joliet and potentially the region, not only now, but also into the future. So again, with this option, it's important that we recognize that there are significant risks associated with this option. There's risks associated with all of the options. So for that reason, it's important that we identify a secondary alternative. That secondary alternative would be, again, purchasing water from the Chicago Department of Water Management. This is, again, water from Lake Michigan. Implementation costs for this alternative range from $500 million to $600 million. It's important to note that is the construction costs and does not include the purchased water costs. So monthly bill increases for this option would range from $60.54 to $51.77, depending on the capacity. Major considerations for this program are, again, high quality water from Lake Michigan and the sustainable quantity, but also the differentiator is purchasing a water from an existing supplier. So with the loss of control, you would gain less responsibility and risk by utilizing an existing supplier. It should be recognized that the resolution that's on the agenda for tomorrow night's meeting is just the first step in what will be a very lengthy process. Moving forward, I wanted to discuss the general program schedule so you'd have an understanding of where we would go from here. The next step would be hiring an engineering consulting team that would lead us through the preliminary and final design. The goal would be to have that completed by April of this year. Then we'd move into preliminary design. This would be the routing study. What would be the more precise route of getting the water out from the pipeline over to Joliet. It's also important that we also do siting studies. Where would that intake into Lake Michigan be in Indiana? We would need to start beginning to have those conversations with communities in Indiana to identify that. We'd also begun to need to have negotiations with also the potential Indiana communities for access to the lake, as well as concurrently conducting negotiations with the city of Chicago. So over the course of the next year, we'd be having those meetings, having those conversations, and then about a year from now, we'd be looking to approve an agreement for either access agreement or a water supply agreement. Also as important is beginning to have those conversations with potential regional partners. We would do that also beginning here very soon and continue those for approximately the next 2 years. And we would look to have those agreements in place by 2 years from now. So again, this is just the first step. We'd be looking to do a lot of work over the next 2 years to make these alternatives a reality. Final design would then begin in 2022 and construction in 2025 with the goal of having construction complete by 2030 and the new source of water online. I think one of the biggest questions I've been receiving is how do you implement such a large process? We cannot overlook the fact that implementation of this alternative water source program is going to be the most significant and costly program that the city of Joliet undertakes within this century. So it's necessary that we have a framework to follow so that we can identify all those threats out there and try and mitigate them while also identifying all of our strengths and potential opportunities and taking advantage of them so that we can present the most successful projects to the city and our residents. So for that reason, we've developed a strategic plan that we'd like to present tonight. So everyone's familiar with what a strategic plan is. This is just a brief overview of all of the different components of it. The full strategic plan is attached to the resolution as an available online. So I just want to talk very high level about a number of these items. Stakeholders. The first step is identifying our stakeholders. Our stakeholders are very key into the success of this program, and it's important that we engage with all of them over the next 10 years. The vision. This, again, is such a significant project that we have to be looking now to where we want to be in 10 years. I'm going to read the vision statement because I think it's very telling to where I think we should be in the next 10 years. We should be recognized by our customers, employees, elected officials, regulatory agencies, regional partners, and the water industry as a leader in providing sustainable, reliable, and high-quality water in an innovative and efficient manner for our community. Equally important is having the mission statement identified. What are we hoping to accomplish with this program? And again, we need to provide a sustainable, reliable, and high-quality water supply for Joliet and potentially the region by 2030 in order to support the public health, safety, and economic interests of the community. So after we had identified what the vision and mission for the program would be, we conducted a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis and identified a strategic direction, which we've broken up into 3 categories. The first category is program oversight and outreach. So what we envision is maintaining very high levels of communication with the city council as well as the city committees. We would have quarterly updates to the city council, monthly updates with the public service committee, and then quarterly updates to the finance committee. We have to maintain our program transparency, and we would do that through quarterly stakeholder meetings. We would continue to focus and improve the awareness of water conservation. Mariana Rafak is our chairperson for the Water Conservation Subcommittee, and it's important that they continue to have meetings and we continue to empower customers to conserve water. And I know she has a lot of ideas on how we can do that moving forward. We also need to continue to educate our customers and elevate the value of water, and we would do this through implementation of a public relations plan. There's significant external coordination for this program. As I previously mentioned, we have to confirm the water supply or access options by conducting negotiations with those entities. We have to be the leaders in the region for the for the alternative water supply, and that would be done through the regional partner outreach that I discussed, having those meetings and engaging with other communities in the area to see who is interested in participating with this, with us on this project. We also need to be very proactive in discussions with regulators and developing a permitting plan. There's significant complexities to any of these projects, and it's important that we be very upfront and have those open channels of communications with the regulators. It's important that we initiate land acquisition early, and we identify through the routing studies what land we do need to acquire and what easements we need to acquire. We have to establish a funding strategy, and the strategy will likely include many different sources, but we need to evaluate them, discuss with the Finance Committee how we're going to fund this. You know, we already have very positive things in place as far as we have WIFIA funding from the federal government, which will could fund through low interest loans up to 49% of the project. So we are already taken strides in that direction, but it's important that we look at all possible options for funding. We also need to develop a political strategy for an option that crosses into 2 states and many communities. It's important that we retain lobbyists and identify those people who can help us through that process of potentially looking for new programs or new funding sources that aren't available right now. Lastly, we need to look at the strategic direction for engineering. We need to retain a team of experts. This is a project that is well beyond the scope of work of the expertise we have at the city, and it's important that we have that team in place by April so that we can begin the heavy lifting on this project. We have to prioritize demand management. Demand management specifically ties into water loss. This is something that we are taking very seriously and studying all potential avenues for how we can look at where we are losing water and how we can improve upon that. We have to prepare a contracting plan, and it's important that the contracting plan, we include value engineering and cost reviews to ensure that we're utilizing public funds responsibly. We have to maintain water quality. Many of you are familiar with the news regarding Flint and University Park, where they also transitioned water sources and had issues with water quality. It's important we work with the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency early and often throughout the process to develop a water source transition plan that would not result in those issues occurring. We also need to conduct pilot testing to confirm that the treatment processes that are proposed are going to meet all water quality regulations. And lastly, we need to implement short-term groundwater strategies. We're going to be relying on our existing water source for the next 10 years. It's important that we have the ability to provide adequate water over that time period for not only our existing customers, but also any development that occurs over that period. So again, this strategic plan, that was a very brief overview of it. It's important that this plan be a living document, something that we evaluate every 6 months and look at to make sure that we are on the right path. I'm confident that moving forward that we can implement the alternatives that are recommended, and I look forward to hearing any questions you might have.
Thank you, Allison. Before we start, I do want to give a big compliment to you, to your staff, to Nick Gornick, to the Environmental Committee, Wayne, Gary, and Maria, you're here today. You literally have put in hundreds of hours, and that's a volunteer committee, so you've really done a service to the people of Joliet. I want to thank you for all the hard work you've done, on top of which it wasn't always pretty. And I know recently some or all of you have had your emails FOIA'd or your cell phone text messages being FOIA'd. So again, I compliment you. I want to thank you for what you've gone through in this process. But having said that, Allison, I know we've talked a lot, so I guess I'll open up to the council if there's questions or comments. I assume that we want to hash this out tonight and vote tomorrow. That's the plan?
It's on the agenda, but certainly that's the council's call as to how quickly you'd like to proceed.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
I have a question.
Yes.
I noticed in an earlier slide, you and I had a conversation today, and I think some things we talked about, it'd be nice for other people to hear as well. I noticed in an earlier slide that there were 3 that the staff had recommended. How did the Illinois River get eliminated? Through what process, or what was the reasoning behind that?
Well, the recommendations in the report still stand. So, and as we had stated at the workshop, any of the options, could be implemented, but there were, restrictions for some of the ones that weren't recommended. The Environmental Commission, during their considerations, felt that the Illinois River, lacked public support. There was questions regarding the water quality. As water professionals, we know that you can treat pretty much any water. However, I think the public perception and just potential unknowns into the future of a river water source was what led to the commission not recommending that option.
And then we also talked about how confident we are in the pricing of the 1.1 billion to get this water source to Indiana. Of course, it's such a long way, and it's going through so many different jurisdictions. What do you anticipate, or, you know, hope to not anticipate, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it would be good to remind everyone that the cost estimates are conceptual in nature, and that, you know, they're provide a good basis for comparison amongst the alternatives. There is the contingencies built into them of 30%. And so, you know, as we proceed over the next couple of years, we'll continue to fine tune that as we are able to reduce some of those uncertainties that were built into the cost estimates.
And then lastly,
Sure.
we also discussed that if we were going to work as a regional supplier for the water, have you had any real interest in different communities partnering with us at this point?
Yes, so the mayor hosted a meeting in July of the last year to kind of kick off that process of trying to gauge interest of other communities. We do know that you know, the issue with the aquifer is not a Joliet-only problem. It is a problem that all communities that utilize the deep aquifer will see at some point. It's, you know, exactly what that time frame is something I know that each of those communities is working on right now to identify. You know, when we initially met with those communities, they completed a questionnaire, and, you know, the results from those were, you know, I think a lot of other communities have not, you know, they're thinking about it. I think once the city selects a source and we start having these more serious conversations, we'll get better feedback. But no, to answer your question, there's not been any firm commitments from any other communities, but I would not have expected any given the unknowns with where we're at right now.
Mayor. Allison, that was one of my questions about our regional partners. The other one was, are we looking at one intake area in Indiana or two?
So when it's constructed, there would just be one intake. However, you know, where that intake is located and what community we would access for the pipeline, that's not known at this time. So that would be part of the siting study that would be done over the next year, is to really start talking to all those Indiana communities and trying to figure out exactly where that intake would be located.
Okay, and then now going directly to Chicago is somewhat more cost effective, correct?
So as we had talked about at the workshop in November, it's initially the costs are less, but then when you look at total costs over 50 years, you know, you're always going to have that purchased water cost and be, you know, subject to those increases. So what we'd see is over, you know, 50 years, you would see that the total cost would be less for the Indiana option.
And we would not have to be purchasing water out of Indiana then?
No, if we went with the Indiana option, it would be a new intake, and we would not be purchasing water.
Okay. And then the funding sources, you've applied for certain funding sources, is that true?
Yes, so the funding that was utilized for the Phase 2 study consisted of a federal loan program called WIFIA, which we did apply for this past summer, and we were notified that we would qualify to move forward with that program. So that would fund up to 49% of the program. We've also contacted the state of Illinois' low-interest loan program, which we utilize quite frequently for other projects, and they've indicated that they could provide $50 million annually over a 5-year period. And then we would also, then the balance would be covered through revenue bonds. However, as I mentioned tonight, that funding strategy, we would need to move forward with looking at potentially public-private partnerships. There's, you know, other tools in the toolbox that we could utilize as far as funding. So that's why we wanted to start having quarterly meetings with the finance committee to present you with what we're, you know, finding as we're moving forward. That also kind of ties into potentially any new programs that could be created at a federal or state level that could assist with this.
Okay, is the 49%, is that a loan or a grant?
That is a loan.
Okay, there's no grants out there that can,
No, through what we found, there's currently no free money available for this type of program. However, we could look to, start looking at a political level of potentially creating some type of program, loan forgiveness, for example, that could apply to this project.
okay, thank you.
Mayor. Like Bob, I'd like to thank you and your staff and everybody on the commission and all the engineers that put a tremendous amount of time in. And I think I do understand why Lake Michigan is our best water source. I guess I'm more on the regional statement, some things that Sherry had talked about in getting some of the other players on board to see if they have a problem with going to Indiana versus Chicago. I know you mentioned it was a federal loan. Do we have to get our national Congress people involved in that? And I don't know what their thoughts are of going into Indiana. On the same note, I know you mentioned in here you would need to get our local and state individuals, and I guess before I could vote on Indiana, I'd like to hear that they are okay with that. The federal people are okay with those issues. And I know you'd put in the information about, I guess this would be a new water treatment plant there. Had you done any work yet on how many more employees we would or would not need to run something of that nature? I guess I was on the other regulatory agencies are going to be the same regardless if we go through Chicago, come from Chicago, or go to Indiana. I know you mentioned probably 20 people you have to deal with, talk to, Department of Transportation, Will Cook, Lake of Indiana County, all these other people. Have any of them been spoken to on ideas that would be better or worse for us on the directions we would want to go? State revolving fund loan available. Is there something in Indiana that would be available for us also, being that the water is coming through there? I think some of our partnerships I would like to see developed stronger now. I realize they're not going to give us a specific answer until we tell them exactly what it has been. I have had some people talk to me outside of the city, and in their case, some comments were made or pieces get in the paper that aren't really true, that we could pay for a lot of our debt on somebody else's back. And I think we're all looking to get the best source definitely looking for the source for the city, and as a regional player, we would be much better served, or the whole state would be much better served. I know there is that group, I believe was referred to as that there's a Southland agency that didn't really have everything together yet. I think they need to probably be re-talked to again. I know you had an EPA, State of Illinois EPA loan, and that falls into one of those other questions. Would that be still available if we went to Indiana? I would hope all of it would make no difference at all if we went to Indiana or not, because it's all coming back through our state here. And how much of a contract guarantee or time has the city of Chicago come up with, and is that still negotiable if they think we're looking very, very hard at going to an alternative source other than them? But again, thank you for everything. Thanks for you sending me the latest materials again, and I appreciate it.
Do you want me to try and answer some of your questions?
If you feel the time is right, sure.
Okay. You talked a lot about the need to initiate regional discussions, and I agree. We have already contacted the Will County Governmental League, and we will be presenting at their February 13th meeting as a kind of kickoff to the program. We would then begin to have one-on-one meetings with those communities to understand, what their interests are. And I will just say again, you already said it, it has never been discussed that partnering with other communities would be a solution for Joliet, any debt issues. The goal would be to reduce the costs for all of our customers, and that can be accomplished by spreading those costs amongst the greatest number of people. So again, that would be the intent of any regional partnering activities. A number of the things you discussed related to issues with Indiana, and again, most of the agencies look at the benefiting agency when they're looking at that. So we've talked with Indiana DNR, Illinois DNR. Those would be the entities that would be involved in the intake, and neither of them expressed any concerns with the Indiana option. The federal WIFIA program is aware that this could be crossing state lines, and that does not have an impact on us receiving that loan. Similarly, with the Illinois State Revolving Program, again, there's ways this can be structured so that the majority of this construction effort will be in Illinois. So we feel that has something that has been addressed. You mentioned coordinating with all those other potential permitting as far as DOTs, and that we would not go to that level of effort until we had the route established. But over the next year, when we're looking at that routing study, is when we would begin to have those conversations to identify any potential issues with that route, and we could then at that time modify the route to address those issues. As far as the city of Chicago, we had not begun any negotiation process. They're actually in the process of conducting a rate study that would then be utilized by them for all of their customers to look at rate structures moving forward. So this is actually a very good time for us to continue the discussions with them as they are evolving not only with their rate structure, but also with their customer outreach and customer involvement. So again, as kind of the way the strategic plan is outlined, is that we will continue to have those discussions concurrently as we further explore the Indiana option over the next year. It's very important, again, to obtain political support, not only in Illinois, but also in Indiana. So we would look to, our strategy for that would be to retain not only a lobbyist at the federal level, but also within Illinois and Indiana to make sure that we have the support for that project. We would, whatever community in Indiana we were partnering with for access, we would look for them to provide a lot of that assistance, since they would be benefiting from this project as well, to make sure there's support in Indiana.
Once the pipe pump route is figured and we have the intake, is there a Indiana fee for taking the water out of Lake Michigan, or?
No, that would be dictated by the community that has the shoreline access.
Okay.
We would look to negotiate with them for an access arrangement, which there would be fees associated with that.
And Councilman Mudron, specifically related to your point regarding the regional partners and Councilwoman Reardon's, we actually had a pretty decent participation from a lot of Southland communities, so South Cook County communities. We had city managers from a number of communities that are part of that Southland Water District that came and participated in our meetings and spoke to us. So I think I want to make sure that the council's very clear that when we use Lake Michigan water, new Indiana intake, we didn't want to put golden handcuffs on the council relative to that. So you have 180 degrees of options, right? Indiana intake could be a partnership with a commission such as Southland. I know that they're very anxious to see what this council is going to actually move forward with, or it could be a go it alone process where we're negotiating with a specific community. But there's been a significant amount of interest by a number of South Cook County communities that attended our environmental commission meetings, and they've had representatives here and have been actively participating in that process. So they're there and they're waiting, and I believe that they're, a group like Southland needs a partnership the size of Joliet to really get it moving.
Thank you.
I have a question. Some of those South Chicago communities, are any of them already getting Chicago water?
Yes, they currently are all receiving Chicago water. It's via Harvey, so they're looking to change.
Because I know Homewood, Riverdale, and Dalton, all those suburbs already currently get Lake Michigan. So they'd be looking into tapping with us because they're getting charged too much now from Chicago?
Yes, they again did kind of that 50-year projection that shows that, Chicago costs go up, and if you own your own system, you can control those costs and see.
That's what I kind of thought, that's why I wanted to ask that question. Thank you.
Yeah, so I just, to be clear, those type of partnership arrangements, nothing is off the table. All the discussions with Southland and potential regional partners in Will County, again, this is picking the source as step one. All of those conversations and that governance structure and all of that is something that we will have to look at over the course of the next 2 years.
Mayor?
Yes.
Well, and when it comes to the Chicago option, what we have to remember is, God bless them, Chicago's got some, serious budget challenges, and their current mayor, Mayor Lori Lightfoot, is trying to address them. The last two mayors have tried to address them. In the course of addressing them, they've sold off some massive billion-dollar assets they've had, meaning their parking and the Skyway. So we don't know what they will do down the road with their own personal budget problems or debt with a golden goose type asset like the world's largest freshwater treatment company, if you might call it that. And I don't think anybody knows yet. We'd have to investigate if that kind of a sale or lease for 99 years would have happened to a private company. Does that nullify any agreement we have with the city moving forward? So I think the dependability of rates there, we'd have to do some more research on, because it could get costly. Also, too, Councilman Mudron had brought up, and I had come to a number of different meetings besides the combined meetings, and there were a number of different representatives from a lot of communities. I talked to some of them. It was all informal, no names to throw out because they, just thinking out loud. And I'm sure there is a concern about, is Joliet going to be a big bully and make a killing? And I think we were pretty transparent about that for those that attended the April meeting, and nobody tried to mute or stop me from discussing it. My general concept was there could be two tiers of folks that partner with us. Those that partner up front and carry the risk and debt that we're going to carry proportionately. A community that draws 3 million gallons, a day versus one that draws 12 million, you divide up the pie accordingly. Those would then be guaranteed the cost of the same cost that we have, the cost of the debt and the cost of the production of the water. Anybody who came out, 6, 8 years later would then become a customer and would have higher rates. So I think the commitment up front by a number of communities, and I think some communities are interested in having that kind of commitment, that would also include the Southland, which has 4 or 5 members, because as Mr. Davidson pointed out accurately, they can't do it on their own. We can. But we're not going to be a big bully. I think that I've heard both the federal department, EPA, Federal Environmental Protection Agency, and following suit the state, they really are pushing or preferring a regional supplier. They don't want onesies anymore of people going in for their own. We have, I think, the best capability of bonding and financial infrastructure to really move a project for ourselves in 10, 12, 15, 20 other communities. So I think that's a real option. And I think a commitment from communities up front, that's something I would be excited moving forward to find those that would want to come in, because we can assuage their fear of gouging. I wouldn't want to be gouged. I just said that a private company might gouge us should they buy Chicago's asset, so I understand that fear. Specifically on your presentation, Allison, I don't know if you necessarily have to bring it up, but you have the map of the routes. Okay, and that's extremely preliminary to preliminary, right? Because what I was always wondering along the way, and I don't know, I can't remember if I've ever asked you, but I've never publicly asked this. Why don't I see it aligned more, say, with state routes and I-80, where we would have federal and state easements that shouldn't cost us anything? Because we own that too as a taxpayer.
Yeah, I can defer to the engineers who prefer the routing study, but it's my understanding that obtaining that type of arrangement with IDOT would be extremely difficult. And so the route that they chose was utilizing a road route where you could also, and maximizing ComEd easements. So, I mean, again, like you're saying, there is a cost associated with that, and that would be something that would have to be explored further during the routing study.
Why are we describing having 152,000 residents of Illinois in the United States of America, and possibly with other partners, 200, 300,000 people, not having realistic access to the assets of the state? I don't think I follow that. Is there an explanation on why it would be difficult?
Thank you, Councilman. I'm Joe Johnson with Stantec. We're a member of the consultant team that worked on the routing studies for the Lake Michigan options. And as Allison laid out, these are conceptual, I think, as you've laid out. We looked at alignments or corridors where we thought we could deal with a single entity. And so you're right, IDOT would be an attractive partner because you could take the I-80 corridor and look at a long route through that. So that's a viable option to be looked at. What we focused on, there's some very long utility corridors. So these are primarily ComEd corridors. So the alignment that you see right now for the new Indiana intake alternative, for example, includes some very long sections where we've used utility corridors. The reason that was done was because it minimizes, number one, the number of parties we have to deal with. That would be similar to IDOT. But it also minimizes the need for restoration of roadways, crossings of complex interchanges and things of that nature. If we're able to use that utility corridor, it's generally a natural corridor. There are certainly other constraints that come into there. And all these things would have to be discussed. So I don't want to indicate that IDOT is off the table. I think, as Allison indicated, part of the preliminary engineering would be these route studies. And an early part of that would be meeting with agencies that control long stretches of corridor, and I think IDOT would be one of those partners.
Because I'm wondering if the conceptual map that you showed, now that means ComEd or Exelon or what have you, could charge for access to that, right?
That's correct.
A rental or leasing.
Right, and that's been we've been involved in other projects before, not certainly of this distance, but shorter distances where we've worked with them. And yes, there's typically a licensing agreement, and there are constraints on how that work is done. So there can be a cost there.
And being a private company, they have all the right in the world to try to make monies off of leases on their private property, it seems like. And I guess we're preliminary, so it's good to hear that it's still in the mix, that I think the state or federal government would have a harder sell to the average taxpayer and voter to say, we're charging you to rent your own land.
Absolutely.
That's sitting
So,
vacant.
no, I completely agree with you, and I think as part of the routing study, one of the early investigations would be to approach both, whether it's ComEd or whether it's a rail line or whether it's IDOT, and have that initial discussion and say, what are the constraints, what are the challenges with these options, and look at existing agreements that they've implemented in other places to understand what those costs are.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all I have for now, Mayor.
Yes. Okay.
Mayor?
Yes.
If I may, just a comment on this. It's not a question, but Allison, I do want to thank you and staff and your whole department and then the commission itself for the work that you all have put in to bring us this information. It's a heavy piece of lifting that we all have to do here, but I certainly I would be remiss if I did not give you guys the applause that you needed for the work that you have done on this. And one last thing, I know we talked about a little bit about some public-private, maybe some entities there, loan money. What does that look like, or do you have any idea at this time, and you don't have to answer this right now, but any other entities that may be able to be involved in this project that maybe funding could come from or through? Maybe, we can kind of look at that, or is that an option to look at any other public-private partnerships we can
Yeah, so
build?
when we, over the summer, we had kind of put out a, request for interest from potential public-private partnerships, and there were a number of firms that submitted, their interest. So now we would move forward with further exploring that with them, under the guidance of the Finance Committee. I will say that there are not many examples of public-private partnerships in the water
In
industry.
this water piece.
We are familiar with them for maybe large transportation projects, so I would not want to say that this is, the norm. And of course, there are significant drawbacks when you have a public-private partnership. The costs to initiate that are significant. So, but it's definitely, again, something that would be explored further in the funding strategy to see if there potentially is a good fit for the city.
Thank you so much.
Mayor?
Thanks.
Yes.
And just one more thing, and please stop me, Allison, if I'm stating something incorrectly here, just to put it all in a nutshell for us non-engineers. Really what we're doing now is deciding on tonight and tomorrow on a source. Forget about the options on the routes that we just discussed, on a source, Lake Michigan versus the rivers. And I'll wear out colloquial phrases. God willing, and the river don't rise, and come hell or high water, we're going to go to Lake Michigan. Should we not be able to, then we have to look for further options at that point. With that said, once we make a decision that we want to go there, then the engineering portion of our team is going to decide how to get there.
That's correct.
In conjunction with the financial portion of our team is going to find out what's the least expensive way to get there, as we just talked about with easements and maybe certain political pressure needed to be expressed in Springfield or Washington. Then we're going to have a third component with the legal portion of our team and those that might have experience in actually negotiating contracts. I would not put you under the gun to be the next great deal maker. You're an engineer, and you've done a great job, and I thank you and the entire commission and all the whole team for putting this together. So it's really those three components, but first we have to decide where we're going to dip our straw, and then make a determination whether or not we can actually get that straw in that.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, this project is massive, so it's going to take many parties working together, as you mentioned, funding, political, legal, engineering, to make it happen. But we're confident that we can make it happen.
Okay. That was my only comment.
One more.
Yes.
Allison, we had a conversation in regards to the Kankakee River, and the indication I had gotten, these are some newer restrictions. Could you comment on that?
That's correct. So when we did the phase 1 study, we were looking at low flow restrictions and for that analysis. And actually, since the phase 1 study was completed in January of last year, they actually increased that water level. So it became even more restrictive in the past year. So I know it was very surprising to many people that the Kankakee River was not one of the recommended options, since it had been studied so much by the city previously. But had the city proceeded with a Kankakee River option in the 70s or even in the early 2000s, these restrictions would not have factored in. So it's kind of, because of these new restrictions, it changed the ballgame completely for the Kankakee River.
Thank you.
Mayor, one more.
Yes.
On that, Allison, does that mean that, from what I heard, they increased the number of low-flow days?
Yes. So,
From what to what?
yeah, so the Illinois Department of Natural Resources sets these guidelines for what the minimum level of flow needs to be in the Kankakee River when there's drought. So the importance of that is so that the fish and mussels and all of the water and animals in the water are able to survive during drought. And so when we learned that those new conditions were in place, we then turned to the Illinois State Water Survey, and they calculated, okay, looked at all the past 100 years worth of drought data to identify how many low flow days there would be. And then we further looked at that to say, okay, we'll be relying on our backup wells for that time period that there is a drought. And what we found is that the existing wells are only going to be able to provide 2 to 3 months of backup reliably. So when the number of low flow days for the Kankakee River exceeded that amount of backup days that we could provide from our wells, is when we, as a project team, could no longer recommend the Kankakee River. It would not be able to support future growth within the city, and we would also have to then look at, water use restrictions, at that time if there was a drought for an extended period of time.
So what are the low flow days now? Can you say, or
Yeah, I'll turn it over to
as opposed to what it was?
Yeah, she
Okay.
worked with on this.
Teresa O'Grady, Crawford, Murphy, and Tilly. So in the report, it's in the Appendix G. It, prior to, in the Phase 1 study, looking at the low flow days, it was 73 days at 40 MGD. And once the low flow was restricted further in Phase 2 to 600 CFS, it's now 120 days for 40 MGD. So it went from 73 to 120.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Any other questions?
Thank you very much, and if you think of anything else, don't hesitate to give me a call tomorrow.
Thanks, Elson. I would also say that after tomorrow's vote, I guess we're disbanding the environmental committee. We're gonna reform it, and you're gonna be not a water committee, but environmental committee. So Maria, I think you're excited about that, but we're gonna work on that moving forward. Thank you.
Next is citizens to be heard on agenda items. First, we have Bruce Renwick regarding Council Memo 12-20.
Excuse me, Bruce Renwick, 1508 West Acres Road, Joliet. I attended, I think, all but 2 of the Environmental Commission meetings over the last 2 years. One, my brother passed away and I had to leave early, and the other, I had a slight heart problem I had to deal with. Anyway, they did a great job. They really, truly did. The only part I disagree with them on, when you come down to it, is the second resolution. I feel, yes, Lake Michigan is the right source for this as opposed to the Illinois. I know the Kankakee looks attractive, but it just doesn't have the volume to handle it. But I think the first choice should be the city of Chicago and not a pipe to Indiana. All right? You go to Indiana and you open yourself up to all kinds of things. First of all, Indiana is part of the Great Lakes Compact. And the Great Lakes Compact defines how they take water out and how they put back in. And you can look at places like Wisconsin and some of the things they've done and see. Illinois, Joliet will get its water under a Supreme Court decision that basically gave a certain amount of water to the state of Illinois. I don't have the exact number, but I think it's like 3 billion gallons, or not, it's cubic feet per second, some number, all right? If you look at, let's say the city of Chicago charges us $5 a thousand gallons for water. On our maximum day, that would be $150,000 for 30 million gallons of water for Joliet. And that's the maximum day out in the future somewhere, okay? The difference between going to the city of Chicago right now and dropping a straw into Lake Michigan and Indiana, depending on the size of the project, if we're going to just cover ourselves, it's about $350 million difference, cheaper going to Chicago. Okay, if we're going to cover the region, it's more like $479,000 cheaper to go to the city of Chicago. All right? I've heard a lot of talk about control. Control costs money. Okay, and what do you really get with control? You'll be operating in a different state where you're not a municipality. You'll be operating under a different set of state regulations with a different state legislature, okay? And that's what you'll have control of, all right? Once you get the water across the state line, yeah, maybe you can do some things here. But they could write a really interesting right-of-way agreement that says, oh, your right-of-way cost per year will be based on how many gallons you pump per year, not just how much land you're using, how long it is, how far away. Okay? So that's one issue there. The thing I guess I want to get to, there's a couple of them here. First of all, I think it would be a mistake to go to Indiana. it complicates things. If you don't go to Indiana and you buy from the city of Chicago, you don't have a wastewater treatment plant to build. You don't have a wastewater treatment plant to run. That's all taken care of by the city of Chicago. There'll be no Corps of Engineers because you won't be building structures out into Lake Michigan. There'll be no Indiana EPA to deal with. There'll be no Indiana IDNR. There'll be no city of Hammond to get a right-of-way if you go through Hammond or some other town in Indiana. And there'll be no Great Lakes Compact issues because it'll be straightforward and clear. We're doing it under the Supreme Court ruling. We get a allocation from the state of Illinois through the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, and we do it there. And everything else is taken care of.
You're at the 4-minute mark. You wrap it up, please.
Okay,
Thank
that's fine.
Thank you.
Yep.
Next is John and Sue Gill regarding Council Memo 6-20.
Hi, John Gill and Susan Gill, 1111 Waverly. On November 21st, we met with the zoning board and asked for an ordinance change to be able to put a driveway in our front yard. It was voted on, 3-2 vote, only to find out several days later that we needed a 4th vote. I always thought the majority rules. Driving around our neighborhood, we got a notepad and we counted how many houses have parking in front of the house. In a 4-block radius, I was amazed, 59 at our park. Just like I want to do it, I want to put a concrete driveway. Some of them are gravel. The reason why we want to put a driveway in front of our house, we've had 3 vehicles, and we live in the middle of the block. We've had 3 vehicles totaled, several times sideswiped. It's to the point right now, we've had our insurance carrier drop us because we're such a high risk. I'd like to also be in accordance to 16900, section 19142, which allows you to get your vehicle off the street after 2 inches of snow. Right now, I can't do that. I have nowhere to park a second vehicle.
Steve, do you know what happened at the zoning board? Were they short members that day?
They were.
Okay, go
Here, I can answer actually that question. There's actually the way that our code is written, it says for this particular thing, you need 4 affirmative votes. So even though there was a majority, it was 3-2.
Can we have it reintroduced with a full board?
That's another option.
Kendall's about to weigh in.
But that's just the way that our code is written, so even though it was a 3-2.
Mayor, to answer your question, yes, we can have this remanded back to the zoning board for a full vote.
Okay, if you could do it, I think this month there's another meeting coming. Not to hold them up any further.
Yeah, we'll have to look into the logistics for this month because we may have already advertised. We may not be able to do it until February, but we'll check into that.
Well, I'm not going to put a driveway in right now.
Yeah, but in terms of the meeting schedule, yeah.
Yes.
I think part of the problem here is we have an ordinance where you cannot park in your front yard. And there have been a lot of, correct me if I'm wrong, Kendall, but I read this whole thing, where there's several homes that you suggest where there's concrete, but they did those illegally. They didn't have permits for those. Is that not correct?
Yes, what we've been able to find is actually no permits for most of those.
So those folks just went and did it.
Correct, we're trying to do it the
So,
correct way.
Correct, but my question is, why didn't we catch that, and why didn't we charge these people for permits and stuff? Because it's a blatant against our ordinance that we have.
We've just also pointed out in 1500 Blackville, Waverly, they just poured it. December, they just poured it.
So Kendall, what are we doing? I mean, are we sending inspectors out there to look at this? Are we finding these people? I mean, this is ridiculous.
Well, I think this just came to our attention when we were having this case come up. We don't, have the forces to go through the entire city to look for issues like this. But we will follow up.
We need
Just
to
want a
follow up on
parking
those neighbors
spot.
that have already done that without, done it illegally. Because technically, we can make them tear it up. But the other problem is, what we have with the snow thing, a lot of those streets in that neighborhood have nowhere to put their cars.
I agree.
We don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I know they suggested to us that we put a concrete pad in our backyard for the car to be parked in. First of all, his truck would not make that turn in the alley, it's not wide enough. And second of all, if it could make that turn, that would be my backyard. So I would have no yard.
So I don't know if we change that ordinance or put an addendum to our ordinance in certain neighborhoods that it's feasible, because otherwise you'll be seeing a lot of concrete pads in the front yards.
Well, we've been talking about that since we got
Right,
this.
but I'm just saying,
I know.
that was the whole issue with this one, I believe.
And it hasn't gone away.
Right,
Same.
right. So, we hear what you're saying, and Kendall's gonna
Mayor,
work with you.
it appears that I think there's only one person that spoke, and that was just for some clarification, not as an objection. Plus, my question of Kendall is, if this is reheard by the Plan Commission and it's voted down, does it then come to us, or does it go with them?
Well, ordinarily, on a straight variance, it would not come to you. In this case, they asked for relief because of the 3-2 vote, and the city council is the body that deals with relief. But ordinarily, you would not have even seen this if we had that full vote.
So it
we
will
can
come
put it on
back
the
to us?
agenda for 2 weeks then.
We can put this back on the zoning board agenda and have the vote.
From zoning board, yeah.
And I don't know what that vote's gonna be like. I don't know if they're gonna get approved or denied at this point, but
But it still comes back to us then?
ordinarily it would not.
If it was recommended for denial, it would come back.
Well, I guess I'm looking to Marty for,
As you're talking, I'm trying to figure it out right now. I don't have any
I
answers.
suppose we could, seeing that they've already weighed in, it could come to the council, we could handle it at this level.
It's not on the agenda, but whatever. I mean,
It's on the agenda for tomorrow, correct?
right,
Yeah.
but not for what? I don't know. They are doing it the right way, and I commend them for doing it the right way. My problem is these other folks, 1108, 1106.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's move on. Why don't you guys, we could talk after the meeting, we'll figure out
I mean,
Marty.
I have a house 2 doors down, doesn't even have a driveway, and just parks in the middle of the yard every night. So, I mean,
And that should be a ticketed thing
and it
as
should be,
well.
but it's not. It's not. And, you know, and no offense to the city of Joliet, but the police go up and down our street all the time, they see it. Nothing's ever done. Yeah, that looks bad because there's not a driveway there. We're really trying, and I'm tired of paying for vehicles, to be honest with you.
I don't blame you. All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Get it worked out somehow.
Next is Drew Zazowski.
Good evening. Drew Zazowski with Thornton's. As each of the council members is aware, the Office of the Liquor Commissioner has recommended a denial of the Thornton's application for a liquor license. We are beyond perplexed by this recommendation and strongly urge the council to vote against this recommendation and for the issuance of these licenses, per the terms of the development agreement that was recently signed by the city. In anticipation of your vote tomorrow night, I'd like to provide the council with a brief summary of how we got here. I've rehearsed this a couple times. It's going to take me 5 minutes, if that's okay, to have an extra minute or two. Hope that's going to be allowed. So in October of 2018, the Planning Commission and City Council approved the special use for the Thornton's Fuel Center. At the time, the city did not want to enter into a sales tax sharing agreement with Thornton's for the relocation of the house. Simply put, the city did not want to allocate taxpayer money for this issue, and ultimately, no relocation or demolition conditions were placed on our approvals. In early 2019, I met with staff who requested that we save the limestone blocks from the Cassaday house and reuse them in historic projects across the city and build a knee wall at the southwest corner of the property. We agreed to the tune of $60,000, and this council approved an easement for the city to maintain that knee wall, further signaling that the solution was sufficient to staff and the elected officials of the city. We finalized our permitting in late April and early May of 2019 and awarded the project to a general contractor in late June with the intent of building and opening this store in 2019. After several weeks of waiting for the formal permits to be issued, it was clear that although city staff had approved the project, it felt like the building and demolition permits were being held. Around this time, there were some rumblings from concerned citizens, preservationists, about the house, which reached a crescendo by August, several months after staff had approved the project and almost a year after the special use had been approved. There was a third party involved in trying to relocate the house at this time, who we vetted and believed did not have the specific expertise nor the funds to relocate the house in an expedited manner. So at that point, the city was unwilling to use taxpayer money to fund the house. The preservationists and private developers, although their intentions were good, were unable to fund the relocation effort. At this point, frankly, we considered litigation, as we believed our permits were being unreasonably withheld after we had complied with all of our obligations. It was around this time that the underlying developer of the site approached the city with an idea to help save the house. The economics of the house relocation could make sense if the city agreed to issue alcohol license and a gaming license to Thornton's. After preliminary discussions yielded merit, Thornton's agreed to meet with the city. At the meeting, the major details of the agreement were ironed out, and it appeared staff was on board. We agreed to forego construction in 2019, sacrificing 4 to 6 months of revenue for us and for the city, and began drafting the development agreement. It took us about 30 days and about 6 figures of our own money to draft the development agreement that this board approved on October 15th of last year. The agreement was very clear, and I'll quote from it. Upon application by Thornton's, the city shall issue to Thornton's a Class A license, waiving the requirements of Section 4-39 regarding the prohibition of motor fuel sales at a liquor license premises. Upon issuance, the Class A license shall include an affirmative waiver of Section 4-39. That's end quote. So after the council approved the terms of this development agreement on October 15th of last year, the city was obligated to vote on the licenses by November 3rd. That came and went without any action by the city. We understood there were some timing issues within the city that prevented the Liquor Commissioner's office from acting. So instead of giving up, I appeared before this council again and agreed to extend the development agreement to give the city more time to process our application. This council approved that extended development agreement on November 17th by a 7-1 vote with the same terms as the original agreement. After that approval, all that was left to do was for the city to follow their process for reviewing licenses, including a Liquor Commissioner hearing. The Liquor Commissioner hearing was scheduled, and I personally attended the meeting on December 11th. The meeting, the city asked us if we would be willing to forego the Class A license and instead be issued a Class B and C license, which come with some tighter restrictions on hours of operations. We agreed to the compromise, as we understood the city was phasing out Class A licenses. The rest of the meeting went very smoothly, and there did not appear to be any issues with our application or presentation. I just want to read you one quote, 2 quotes actually, from the actual recommendation. Quote, approval of the requested liquor license should not alter the essential character of the area or the city as a whole. Police Chief Al Rochner states that he does not foresee any special law enforcement problems associated with the issuance of this liquor license. And finally, to come full circle, we received news last week that the recommendation from the Liquor Commissioner's office would be to deny our application, with the main point of contention being the existing ordinance, 4-39, which this council specifically agreed to waive as part of the executed development agreement. We're not sure what has changed. There's some talk in the recommendation from the Liquor Commissioner's office of setting a precedent for future or existing fuel stations. But what we have here is a unique opportunity with this project to do something that the community has specifically asked for multiple times. To quote your own chair of the Joliet Historic Preservation Commission, Sarah Stovall, from her letter to this council in September of 2018, the commission encourages city staff and the city council to work with the developer to exhaust all options for saving the building by relocation or other means, end quote. Well, this is it. This is my last point here. I know I'm over my time. It's because we're talking about precedents here, and as a business partner in the community that is about to spend about $5 million on this investment, I would like you to think about the precedent that you're setting if you enter into this development agreement that makes certain contractual representations and covenants of the city if you do not follow through on them. Please consider the effect of that precedent while thinking about your vote for tomorrow night. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Yeah,
Well, we'll discuss this when it's appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's public comments.
Next is Mary Beth Gannon.
Mary Beth Gannon, 903 Western. You know, when word got out that the Cassidy Mansion was going to be saved, that the city of Joliet and Thornton's and the Will County Historical Society were going to work together, it was such a beacon of hope across the country. This story was picked up by the Associated Press. It was reported in U.S. News and World Report. I have heard from preservationists in Iowa, Pennsylvania, and several other states saying, way to go, way to save history. To say that I'm stunned here is an understatement. You know, when we have 2 casinos in this town and a marijuana store, I don't see how we can take the moral high road on this. You know, the time to address these issues was in October, even November, and some of you did do that. You know, this is a commercial corner, it's on a highway. This should go through. We currently have a winery in a very densely residential area. Mr. Zazowski pointed out at a previous meeting that Thornton's would be in compliance and backup of their other stores where they have the same type of license and how many beers they've sold, which is 3, he said, in 2 years, and that the beer is kept behind the point of sale. You know, we just thought this was a done deal, and I'm really stunned that it's happening, and I don't understand, you know. And I guess to stress what's going on now, we have lost hundreds of important houses and buildings throughout Joliet. I have an ongoing data list of them, and I really hope this one isn't added to it. I certainly won't read you all, but I will read you a few of them that are not here anymore because people didn't care enough to save them. So, rest in peace, Will County Courthouse, number 3. Rest in peace, Old St. Joe's. Rest in peace, Old Silver Cross. Rest in peace, Woodruff Hotel. Rest in peace, E.B. Brown. Rest in peace, Ducker's, Boston Store, White Store, the Little Theater, Ambrose Doty House, Colonel George Snowd Home, St. Mary Academy, the Seaver Mansion, hundreds. Please let that sink in. And this is likely the oldest house in Joliet. It's not an ordinary house, the oldest standing house. Please consider that. And I think when we give our word on something, we should keep it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak on an agenda item?
Vince Alessio, 912 Westminster. I'm on the zoning board, so there's some questions. It was a 3-2 vote. We had 2 people absent that day. Ms. Safford, who sits on the board as well, questioned the homeowner at 1111 Waverly about the neighborhood characteristics. And some reason I looked at the meetings prior, or the minutes prior to the meeting, as I voted no on the special use permit for, or the variance for the driveway, I also mentioned that that was one of the neighborhoods, as I was knocking doors for my council race, that people were very concerned about the changing aspects of the neighborhood. I do think it is notable the amount of unpermitted driveways that are in the neighborhood. This is, again, that is the same concern. So while I do commend the homeowner for coming to the city and doing it the proper way, I believe that these neighborhoods, you know, when I drive through Joliet, I notice people's beautiful front yards, these beautiful homes. And some of the neighborhoods are changing a little bit, and people are not happy about it. So that's part of the reason I voted no. I don't know if you guys have any questions for me, but I figured I'd clear up anything on that specific agenda. So. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Audrey Secco, 205 Crabapple Court. I'm here about the Cassidy Mansion again, and I didn't think I'd have to be here again. I don't understand why this mansion is still being talked about and negotiated. I don't know why this is happening 2-3 months ago. This was supposed to have been agreed, and an agreement was reached between Thornton's and the city, and now there's this obstacle in the way. And it didn't just jump up and appear here overnight. Someone's been sitting on it, and I think that that was low to keep it quiet, and now all of a sudden it comes up again. And I just want to say, I hope just this once, the mayor and the council, Jones, Mr. Jones, and Thornton's can come to an agreement to save this one-of-a-kind building. And you know, Councilman Turk, as you have previously said, you don't like to kick the can down the road. So let's get this settled and get it done and save the mansion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Tracy Brown, 315 Pine Street, Joliet. I was raised as an East Side girl. I'm barely on the West Side now, but I'm still an East Side girl. Cascade Mansion, I've spoke about it before. It was a little heated last time, we're trying to maintain this time. I think the gentleman from Thornton's presented a very good case. I agree completely with him this time. The Cascade Mansion needs to be saved. It is incomprehensible that this is still being drawn out. The home is sitting there with no windows. I believe the doors are shuttered, exposed to the elements, everything else, and it's deteriorating as we speak. And here we are again in January 2020 doing this again. On the other hand, the other side of the coin is the East Side has been rapidly deteriorating as far as economics and what the citizens have. There's no grocery stores. The gas stations there are ripping off customers daily. Thornton's is a wonderful opportunity, and to lose that opportunity over a stupid liquor license is also just as reprehensible. Stop. Just stop and do what you're supposed to do. Move on, save the house, build the stupid gas station. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak on an agenda item?
Edward Secco, 205 Crabapple Court. No speeches, no anything else, just a fervent hope that you people can finally work together on something and save the Cassidy Mansion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Seeing none, we'll pass it over to the city manager to discuss tomorrow night's items.
Thank you, and good evening. Our first item under the normal sequence is the mayor's report. We have two things. We have recognition of Joliet Central Academy Girls Softball IHSA Class 3 state runner-up status, and then any appointments that the mayor may have. Under our council committee reports, relatively light tomorrow, we'll have public safety, public service, as well as anything on the ad hoc city manager search committee. On consent agenda, as typically appears, we have meeting minutes. We have meeting minutes from the December 11th and December 16th council meetings. We also have position vacancies, and we do have 3 vacancies on the list. The first is an upgrade of a part-time planning assistant in the Community Development Department. When I say upgrade, I mean going from part-time to full-time. This was a position change that was approved in the recently adopted budget, and the funding of this position was built into some of the development fee increases that had occurred actually a month or so before that budget approval. So that's a new status, but basically an upgrade. We also have 2 positions being recommended for filling due to due to retirement, we have a police sergeant and a part-time parking enforcement officer. Under licenses and permits, we have a resolution approving the denial of a Class A liquor license for the Thornton's location. Our Deputy Liquor Commissioner is here to do a presentation.
Mayor, Council. Public hearing, Council Number 2-20. A public hearing was held on 12/11/19 at 9 a.m. for a request for a new Class A liquor license. The applicant has now been changed and agreed upon as a new Class B and C license. The applicant is Thornton's LLC, DBA Thornton's number 340, located at 400 Collins Street. No citizens appeared in opposition. There are no outstanding money owed to the city. Police and fire have no issues. Building department has no reports as the building has not been constructed yet. There are certain facts to consider when issuing a liquor license or not. Under the Joliet Code, Section 4-39, it reads, motor fuel sales prohibited. No license shall be sell or otherwise transfer from a licensed premises any motor fuel, gasoline, or similar product used in propelled motorized vehicle. This section shall not apply to any person who has issued a liquor license for a premises such as sales occur or will occur at any part of service station in operation or under construction prior to the effective date, September 20th, 1989, of this amendment to the Joliet Liquor Code. Based on the facts of the hearing, the Liquor Commissioner is recommending denial of the license. Any questions?
Questions?
I have a question. I want to know why we're here. Why we're here. I thought we passed this thing.
I would agree with that.
We passed it. It was a done deal. And why are we back?
Well, I guess I can answer for the liquor. They hadn't applied for a liquor license, so there's a process. As was pointed out, this violates our ordinances, which we haven't looked to amend. But more importantly, I think there's 36 other gas stations in Joliet. Probably half of them have already called my office demanding a liquor license, and more importantly, they want the video gaming, which is the real point of the liquor license. It's not, I don't believe, to sell alcohol, it's to make money on the video gaming. So you're putting my office in an impossible position to say yes to one and no to 36 other existing gas stations that have already invested in doing business in Joliet. So I would recommend either change the ordinance or allow it for everybody, or find a different way. Certainly, yeah, I met with you initially when Thorns came in, absolutely 100% in favor of your project, but I understand the want to save the house, I agree, but there has to be another way to do it, or give the video and the liquor at every other gas station. There's really no way around it. You have to be
We've
consistent
turned down
and fair.
tons, the Sitco out by the mall is a good example. We turned them down. They were building a brand-new building and redoing the whole thing out there by the mall. Looks a million times better than it did before out there. And they probably called us, if not once a week, twice a week, asking for video gaming and alcohol in there. And we told them no every single time. So they just spent a ton of money out there as well. And I don't know what the repercussions I'd have to tell them no and then telling somebody else yes. So that, just the point that, and normally there's a process with us as liquor commissioners that we do all these things first and then vote on it afterwards. And this happened in the opposite way, so.
You know, and I understand you clearly, but what I don't understand is that we voted on this, we waived that.
I wasn't any
This
part of any of
council,
that,
I'm
so-
sorry, I mean, I'm talking to my colleagues
Okay,
here
sorry.
and everybody else. We voted on this. We waived the section 4-3.
Waive it again, vote on it again. I'm not recommending it. So if you guys want to override my recommendation, feel free. I'll forward the phone calls to you. I'm not going to get beat up by every gas station owner in town because
I
you're
know several gas
selectively applying the
stations
ordinances.
that have
Excuse me.
selling
Excuse me.
liquor.
If you want to change the ordinance, change the ordinance. But to tell one business yes and 36 others no, it doesn't work. So, but again, you're free to override our recommendation.
Mayor?
Yes.
I voted no on this originally, not because I don't want to see the Cassidy Mansion saved for those that truly want to save it, but exactly for this reason. And I said this a couple of months ago. Now, I hope nobody up here is seriously considering changing our citywide ordinance, border to border, to allow on-site consumption of alcohol at every gas station in the city. Really? Now, somebody earlier had mentioned about having casinos and bars. Yes, they're casinos and bars. They're not gas stations where you pop in for 5 minutes. And while I understand Thornton's had said originally, and I don't challenge their commitment to it, that they would have one warm beer on site and sell 3 beers a year, maybe. Is every gas station going to do that? You guys aren't seriously considering that, are you? That's my comments, Mayor.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes.
if I might. There are gas stations right here in this town that is selling liquor, okay?
They are, that's illegal.
Well, I think you might need to revisit that, but I'm saying this to say that, that we have wasted a lot of time, and this people were out of place that was holding up things, but we went through this. I thought it was a done deal. The mansion was saved. Thank you so much, Thornton, for that, because it was an important piece to this city, and you guys stepped up and you provided that saving grace for the mansion. And so, like I said, we started talking about this in October. I think we voted on it November, 19th or 17th or someplace around there. So it was, it was a done deal, and everybody could, it's a win-win. But I still say, I don't know why it's back.
I just explained why it's back.
Well,
I hear what you're saying, why it's back.
It was brought forward in October with an improper application, so that was rejected. There were a number of things missing from the application. It was brought forward again in the end of November. We began the process. We put this on hyper speed to get it done. How long does the process normally take for a liquor license?
About 3 to 4 months.
Okay, so we're way ahead of schedule. There's been no delay on my part. But again, it's been made clear to me by other gas stations in town, they're not gonna stand for this. So I made my recommendation. You can vote any way you want. But again, I don't know how we face the other businesses and tell them that this inconsistent position is the right way to go.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and Jim, we can certainly give a B or a C license to we cannot give a consumption and A license to a gas station.
Can't give no license to it. There's only one in town. Mickey's sells the thing, they were grandfathered in because they had it before. No gas stations in town right now legally can sell unless it's a
Packaged or otherwise.
packaged or otherwise.
So what gas stations are you?
Oh, I know of several.
Well, make sure you give Jim the list of the gas stations.
Several.
They'll be shut down immediately.
That is selling liquor gas, so anyway.
The truck stops can sell. If it's a truck stop and they sell, that's a national law. If they sell over amount, state of Illinois rule, they're allowed to sell things. If they sell over, I think it's 100,000 motor fuel, something like that, they're grandfathered by the state of Illinois. But in the state of Joliet, gas stations cannot sell alcohol.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I guess we got an email from the Collins Street Neighborhood Association that said they wasn't involved. I don't know if you know, Councilwoman.
Yes, they
involved in the.
A couple of them were not.
Right, so they were against this because there was, I guess, 40 licenses already in that area. So was they, I know it wouldn't be your job to reach out to them, maybe it would be Thornton's.
We mail out the cards and stuff like that to people around.
Right.
That's part of the process. There's a statutory time period we have to wait. So again, to say that this has been slow played is completely wrong.
You have to do there's a card that gets mailed out, we put a sign on the thing, and then there's a 15-day period where we mail out cards and thing to let them know when the hearing is gonna be, so anyone that would like to say yay or nay to it, or have any feelings at all, can come to that hearing and voice their opinion.
Okay, but I mean, we just got an email tonight, this
Okay.
evening, from Collins Street Neighborhood Association.
I know,
They
Mrs.
sent it to all of us, saying that they were displeased, I guess, with the fact that this may pass or, for approval, from my understanding of the email. But my question going back to when it was first voted on, and I couldn't support this. I know one meeting, Mr. Hansen had stated that the nails was in the coffin for the mansion. Then we come back a couple weeks later, or maybe a month later, with this idea of giving gaming to Thornton to move the house.
Okay.
$1 billion company to spend a couple $100,000 to move a house, but it's gonna make that back in less than 6 months, probably. And then I asked the question, I don't know if it was to Mr. Hansen or to the Thornton representative, what happens after that? Because my understanding, after the mansion is moved, who's gonna take care of the mansion at that point? I guess the Historical Society has to raise money to fix the windows, to fix the door that they said, and the roof or whatever, connect the water, the lights and all of that. So Thornton is gonna be done after spending $200,000, $300,000 moving it, was gonna make millions of dollars off of the gaming and open up the city to all type of probably lawsuits from these other gas stations because they're not given a liquor license. Is that kind of sums it up, council, mayor, staff?
Well,
Steve?
I mean, I could give a little bit of sort of the background before this was first brought to the council. As you know, we had, a lot of community uproar with regard to the overall possibility of demo. So as we negotiated with Thornton's, and then Mr. Hanson and the Will County Historical Society got involved, we had a lot of internal discussions, and we certainly thought about that problem, about, how do you say yes to one when in effect you possibly have others. But it was pretty clear that because of the fact that this house was on this property, and it was part of the development of this property, that there were some pretty unique circumstances. For instance, if there was another potential development that came in, and they were willing to put money into a preservation project for us to waive a code or to issue a variation, I mean, clearly, that's not a precedent that carries to every possible gas station or every possible development of the same sort. So we had a lot of internal discussions on that. In fact, there was language that was drafted within the agreement that sort of identified the uniqueness of this particular incident. So, I mean, from our perspective on staff, we didn't necessarily think this was something that opened Pandora's box. We thought the specific attributes of what was being preserved, plus the method of ensuring its preservation, that was really unique to this property and not applicable to others.
Mayor?
Yes.
I would suggest if there was a sundown on this agreement as it pertains to the uniqueness of saving the Cassidy Mansion, you might be able to, and I'm no lawyer, but you might be able to, common sense-wise, maneuver or finagle around that. But if it takes 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year for the corporation to recoup its money through this, then it goes from here to perpetuity, having an unfair advantage to all the other gas stations and making a profit year in and year out on it. And I don't think we can defend that.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Of the representative? What happens if your liquor license is denied? What is Thornton's position going forward?
Not sure. We'd like to exhaust every option we can. We've got a little bit of time left. This is not the season to be building anything right now, so we've got some time before the spring hits. But, the way the development agreement reads is we have an option to terminate the agreement if the conditions are not followed. So we would have to either extend the development agreement and work out some other scenario with the city, or it would be terminated and the house would be taken down, potentially. It's a real risk.
One question too.
Mayor, just one question, the Liquor Commissioner, Jim Oak. I know there is a gas station in town that does not have a liquor license that has gaming. Is that based on the volume of gas that they?
That would have to be one of the truck stops, yes. So,
I mean, there's one right in the center of town too, I think.
those aren't legal machines.
How'd they get them? I mean,
You just get a vendor and you put in machines.
You can let them know after the meeting.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I can go to any place.
Okay.
Literally, that
Right.
goes to the
Okay.
state police, because
Okay.
state police would have to come in and take care of that.
okay.
They're probably getting moved right now.
Just one question, and this is for Thornton's. Thank you so much. Bottom line, is this a deal breaker for Thornton's? As it
The Thornton
relates
project as a
for
whole?
The Thornton project as a whole. Is this a deal breaker for you?
No, we
No,
intend
it's-
on building the
okay.
store as soon as the weather breaks, no
Okay.
matter what.
All right.
But the deal that
it
was-
is it will blow up the Cassidy house. This is where we are.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Question, Mayor?
Yes.
Jim, just to be clear too, when it comes to the state regulations and laws on liquor, on gaming, the liquor license can't be any liquor license. It can't be a packaged liquor or a tableside. It's got to be a consumption on premises,
Yes, it's gotta be a
a
full
license.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Any other questions, comments?
Well, I kind of feel like we've been put in the trick bag here because we had this whole thing settled. And now,
Yeah.
because staff thought, oh, it's okay, but didn't run it by us before, and we kind of went in with good faith to save the house and everything, but now we have this other issue of major lawsuits.
Yeah, since those meetings in October, I've had a lot of negative feedback in my office from gas stations all over town. It's
I mean,
causing a
gas
problem.
stations call, and we probably get people from out of town. There's a BP on the corner of 59 and Caton Farm. They call, probably last year, they probably called once every other week. Not to point other people out. Gas stations call all the time. They want to get the pour license and they want to get video gaming, and it's a revenue stream. So why wouldn't you want another revenue stream? But in our, we tell people the same thing. Literally, we have a copy of this ordinance in our office posted on the cabinet. So when you talk to somebody on the phone, you can just lean back in your chair and say to somebody, 4-39, you can read them off to them. I'm terribly sorry. So if you want to talk to your councilman and see if they can change the ordinance, great. I mean, our job is to hand out liquor licenses according to ordinances. So if the ordinance is changed, then that's fine. But until that point happens, that's why we have to deny it. It's not per our ordinance.
No, and I understand that. I'm just saying, had we known at the time that all these other gas stations wanted this as well, I don't know if they would have changed our vote or not. I'm sure it would have, but there's preservation here of the oldest house in Joliet. And Marty, isn't there any way we can make an exception to this because this old house, the oldest house in Joliet, this is the deal breaker?
Well, what we did is as Mr. Jones indicated through Council Memo 552-19 and 607-19, through the Council Memo, through the resolution authorizing the agreement and the agreement itself, we kind of laid all that out to try to distinguish this from any other potential.
But what I'm saying, Marty?
What? That's what we did.
But my question is, okay, that won't protect us from any lawsuits from these other gas stations that want this, will it?
Well, that's why we put it in there. I can't tell you what another gas station will do.
All right.
Well, Mr. Mayor.
Members of council, Mr. Mayor, if I could address the council, Michael Hanson, on behalf of the Will County Historical Society, who's another partner in this agreement. You've heard an awful lot tonight, Marty. Thank you for your just exact understanding of what the city council already did with the agreement. This is really about the city council right now. It's not about the mayor. It's not about his recommendation or anything like that. It's about all you 8 people who voted 7-1. That's what I'm looking at right now. And thank you, Mr. Jones, for your earlier legal explanation as to exactly what the council previously did. Okay? And in answer to your comment, Councilman McClone, you've already voted upon this agreement. I've done with precedent for 44 years as a lawyer. The precedent for this agreement is totally clear. I don't think there's going to be another gas station in Joliet, Will County, or the United States that's going to come in and pay $300,000 to save an 1850 house. That is you remember this phrase? Quid pro quo. Have you heard that in the last 3-4 months? That's the quid pro quo here. That's the consideration. That's what 7 of you voted to do. And I would highly recommend you 7 tomorrow night, maybe even the 8th one, vote in favor of this and uphold exactly what you did. Because I can't say that no gas station is going to sue the city, but that's what you did. And I think Mr. Shanahan can absolutely properly back this up in any court of law or anything. And you should do exactly what you said you would do a while ago, okay? And it was given careful consideration by the legal department before this was entered into. Questions were asked, they were answered, and now we're here. And I think that all you council people should remember that. Councilman Morris and others.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Hanson, I believe there's a gas station on McDonald and Cass Street, Mr. Muhammad, that will pay $300,000 to move the house if he can have gaming in his gas station on McDonald and Chicago Street. I believe he would do that. We can call him and ask him.
I'd like to know how he's going to move the gas station how he's going to move the house from this location, though.
No, don't pay the $300,000.
That's not the point.
The point was that you said that you don't believe there's no other gas station that would pay $300,000.
I never said that. No, I never said that. There's already an agreement in place with the city, it was the city council, to do exactly what is going to happen here tonight.
Mr. Mayor, I think the Collins Street Neighborhood Association hasn't weighed in. They sent the email out. I don't know why they missed getting notification, But we sit here sometimes and talk about our neighborhood association, what they mean to the city, we should hear from her. I don't know if what she's gonna say based on the email that I read, that they just didn't get informed or they hadn't weighed in on the gas station getting a liquor license in an area that's flooded with liquor license at this point. That, along with the fact that, and maybe I misunderstood you, Mr. Hanson, but I believe that there are other ways of getting the house moved. I would like to save the house as much as anybody else, but I don't think that this was the right project to do that when they're gonna reap the benefits 100 times.
You know, you talk about precedent here. The Joliet City Council has entered into a legal agreement. What's going to happen in the next legal agreement the city council entered into? Well, here's what they went and reversed themselves in another agreement. I mean, I think, that's precedent. That's where I think you're going to be in a real trick bag. It's not going to be another Cassidy House situation. It's a whole nother agreement.
Mayor? Mr. Hanson, if I'm nothing.
Betty?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Just to Councilman Morris, the president of the Collins Street Association was here the night. I think Tanya was here for 3 of those meetings that was talked about with Thornton's, and that they did not indicate at that time when even in public comment. She did, after the meeting that I attended for the Collins Street Neighborhood Association, was concerned, and she mentioned that concern. And after we talked about it, that was the end of the conversation until I received the same email. So they were aware, they were here the night of. We did discuss it later with the president. It wasn't never brought up in the Collins Street Neighborhood Association meeting and I believe Councilman Dickinson, even the mayor, was at some of those meetings as well, so.
Well, I can reach out and see if they want to come tomorrow, and speak tomorrow.
Sure, not a problem, not a problem.
Yes.
Mayor, Mr. Hanson, if I'm nothing, I'm consistent and transparent, so no, you won't get my vote tomorrow. My vote will remain the same. I did outline my opposition to this, not as an opposition to the mansion itself, but to this process. I believe I may have said something along the lines that night of, is this really what you guys want to give away to save the mansion? I tried to engage in an expanded conversation like we're having tonight, that night, but as you know, it was a 7-1 vote, and I talked into an echo chamber. Now, my colleague to my left here, Councilman Morris, brings up a good point. I hear you saying, Mr. Hanson, well, you're protected because they're saving a mansion. Now, that's on the property they bought, but is it explicit enough that, whether it's Mr. Muhammad that you mentioned, or another gas station over by where I live says, look, the Historical Society says they want to save this house, as was outlined earlier tonight, that we lost hundreds and there might be hundreds more that could be saved. What if every gas station says, I'll spend $300,000 to save that house? How does that look in court?
Well, I'll let your attorney answer that question, and then I'll answer the question after your attorney answers.
Well, I don't deal in speculation, Councilman Hagen. I think you know that. I can't
Right.
speculate on what they're going to do.
Right, but you understand what I'm saying, Marty? I don't know how explicit this deal is that you're referring to. Does it say it must be on a certain property or within a certain distance of the gas station that is paying to save that historic site?
I could, on a positive note, I think what we've learned in this process is that we need to up the fees on those machines, because apparently they're worth $300,000. So maybe we should reconsider that.
Just one final thing with me, and now this goes to Marty, because Marty, you met with Thornton's the night that we had that we entered into the agreement. It was a last-minute piece because I think we were on a deadline. Marty, you presented to us on this council that resolution with the language that said waiving of Section 4-39.
Yes.
Correct? So you had gone through this legally for the city, and you presented this to us, right?
Yes, and Section 4-16 F2. But what we didn't
Yes, with the
waive
deal.
is the process of issuing a liquor license, which is the the public hearing before the liquor commissioner, the notice, and then the recommendation to the full council. And again, as it's already been pointed out a couple of different times, the vote is up here. It's a recommendation from the liquor commissioner, and the ultimate decision is up to.
Right.
up
So
to
it was a
this group.
7-1 vote.
But the mayor undertook that process. He's made his recommendation in this case, so he is following his ordinance. And now that agreement has said that this council, your 8 people, have got to vote in favor to issue this license. That's what it says.
Thank you for clearing that up. I think they got lost somewhere in the translation. That this is the process, it's working out. I made a recommendation. If you don't agree, vote against it. There's nothing to argue about. So,
Mayor?
yes.
No, and I figured that out right away. Obviously, it's just a recommendation. It's just a recommendation, and you don't even get to vote on it unless it's a tie or it has an effect. My question is to Marty. Marty, with a recommendation under current ordinance coming from the Liquor Commission to turn it down, should this council vote 7-1 to approve it, what kind of additional liability do we have should some kind of car accident be related to consumption of alcohol on that premises or alleged to have happened?
That'd probably be a question for Thornton's. But
No, I mean city liability for making an exception
that's
to our ordinance.
that's another speculation. Who knows?
Okay.
Anyone else? Can we move on?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item is public hearing under Council Memo 3-20. We have 2 items relating to property at 275 West Laraway. We have an ordinance as well as a resolution. As background, this is a 40-acre parcel which is located at 275 West Laraway. It's the former home of Laraway Elementary School, which you recall about a year and a half ago relocated to a Rowell Road location. The ordinance portion of this approves a rezoning from B3, which is its current zoning status, to light industrial I1. The resolution approves an amendment to the existing annexation agreement, and since it was used as a school, had B3 zoning, this amendment incorporates standards relating to industrial development, screening requirements, infrastructure requirements, fees, and it also provides 2 conceptual plans of development. The Plan Commission did review the petition and recommended approval by a 7-0 vote.
Marty, what council memo was that?
3-20?
3. It's not on the pre-council agenda?
It's for tomorrow's council.
Tomorrow night's.
Yeah, it was tabled.
Okay.
Because the public hearing is not tonight, it's not listed on pre-council
Right.
because the public.
Okay.
Sorry for the confusion. I should have
No.
said it's for tomorrow. Our Plan Commission did review the petition and recommended approval by a 7-0 vote. And Mr. Hanson, and I believe another rep are here if there's any questions you may have on this property. Okay. Ordinance and resolutions. First ordinance is Council Memo 5-20. This is an ordinance that would designate 113 North Ottawa, which is St. Mary's Church, as a local historic landmark. You'll recall that this was tabled at our last meeting, and it came forward to the council due to the fact that our Joliet Historic Preservation Commission undertook an effort to landmark the property. There was an 8-0 vote to proceed with landmarking. And, the effort, frankly, was done for excellent reasons. The church has very significant Joliet religious and historical past, and the church has an architectural significance in terms of its Gothic revival structure. At the last meeting, I did express some concerns along with our corporation counsel with regard to the process of landmarking property that an owner hasn't asked to be landmarked. The property is presently for sale, and our concerns dealt with the fact that would this be viewed as a taking of sorts or, some low-level eminent domain due to the fact there would be some significant restrictions placed upon it. While this matter was moving forward, you recall we had some discussions with the owner talking about the possibility of putting in a voluntary covenant that would prohibit demolition or significant destruction of the property, which, as this thing was moving forward, he did agree to do. There is a copy of that restrictive covenant attached to your council memo. and it has been recorded by the county. So that is in effect right now. And our staff, we basically feel that this voluntary effort is sufficient to prevent the demolition and the destruction of the church. But perhaps more importantly, we feel that any redevelopment of this property is going to be very, very costly. It's going to require the use of incentives. We do have a downtown TIF district. We have a special service area. And the condition assessment report that was also attached shows that there's about a $1.8 million tab just to do some of the things to keep the building intact, not even talking about interior renovations. So we, to make the point again, we feel that any sort of redevelopment is going to have incentives. We feel that the staff process of requiring certain design elements to be incorporated or to be preserved provides an economic incentive for them to start to meet some of the characteristics we would like for the preservation end. So we feel that our recommendation is that the landmarking ordinance not be approved, just due to the fact that the covenant's there to prevent the destruction, and the economic incentives in the development agreement would basically get the things we need for preservation locked into any future project. Mr. Feldman, the owner, is here. He's not going to be available tomorrow, so if the council has any questions regarding ownership, we would certainly ask that you make those questions known tonight, and he can answer them.
Any questions?
I have not.
No.
Okay. Council Memo 6-20, this is the matter regarding 1111 Waverly. So I assume, based upon this going back to the ZBA, the council may be in a position to table that. So I won't go into any description of that. Council Memo 7-20, this is an ordinance that declares property at 4200 West Jefferson a nuisance. This is the Joliet Plaza Inn and Suites, and I've asked Kendall to give a little bit of background on this.
Thank you. Mayor and Council, this is the Joliet Plaza Inn and Suites, located on the south side of Jefferson Street, west of the airport. This dates back to May of 2014, when there was a storm that damaged a portion of the hotel that got it onto the city's radar screen. There was a memorandum of understanding that was drafted at that time for repair, rehab work at that property. There was a failure to comply with the timeline in terms of getting the work done at that time. Recently, staff has been working with my understanding is that there's new ownership on the property. We've been working with the new owner. There are several issues in the building with regards to code non-compliance. We're looking for plans, architectural plans that would essentially lay out the rehab work for electrical, plumbing, structural analysis, and we just haven't been confident that the owner has heard what we were trying to do with this property in terms of getting it into compliance. So the public nuisance request is, in this instance, more of a tool to get the new ownership to work on a more timely basis with staff to get this property back up to code.
Mayor?
Yes.
And I appreciate earlier today, Kendall, I had some, questions about that. Real quick, just a couple of quick questions. Do we have any information? Are we privy to why, after a storm, the damage? Did they not have insurance? Why is it taking so long?
That information I
We don't know, do we?
I don't know.
How many units are there total, and how many are uninhabitable?
So there's currently 40 units that are, my understanding, occupied in one portion of the building. There's another wing where the first floor is primarily used for corridors. The second floor is where I think they had suites, and those are currently unoccupied. I don't know what the number of units are there, but there are currently 40 occupied units.
And what type of, what are the occupants? Are they short-term, long-term, regular hotel, motel?
My understanding is it's being run as sort of a single room occupancy type. So these are probably short and long-term.
Depending on the individual. So
residents, yes.
the next step, if they don't finally comply with bringing it in the code, is for us to condemn it through court?
Well, we would go and get a court decree, consent for demolition. That would be the next step if we don't get compliance.
All right, thank you.
The next ordinance is Council Memo 7-20. Well, I'm sorry, that's the one I just did. Resolutions. Council Memo 9-20. This is a resolution that authorizes the sale of police dog to Officer Christopher Darcy. Just like all of us, as dogs get old, there becomes a point where it's time to retire. And Bo has been a member of our canine unit since, I think, 9 years total. Fortunately, we're in a situation where the handler of the dog is interested in basically keeping the dog outside of the police service. These are dogs that basically cannot be turned over to civilians. They can't be given to shelters. Their training makes them a certain kind of animal where, there's really two ways to deal with it. One is to get somebody who's going to take care of it and who has the handling skills. Another way is that the dog doesn't live. So we're very fortunate in that Police Officer Darcy is interested in taking the dog. This is pretty common within police departments with canine units. And for the sum of $1, we will be able to transfer ownership and hopefully have Bo live a long dog life doing things other than police work. Any questions? Council Memo 10-20 is a resolution approving a fiduciary agreement between the City of Joliet and the Metropolitan Area Narcotics Squad. This is an agreement that establishes protocols for funds awarded to our police department from the Treasury and Justice Department. It's just pretty much a standard ordinance governing funds and uses of funds. Council Memo 11-20, this is a resolution that accepts a permanent easement for a permanent and a temporary construction easement for property for the Hobart Road Water Main Extension Project. This is located at the northwest corner of Hollywood and Shanahan Roads, and this is being acquired for $20,000 by the city. Council Memo 21-20, we've heard an awful lot about our primary and secondary alternative water sources. Certainly, if there are any questions that anyone has after that great presentation and the work of our commission, you can bring them up tonight or tomorrow. No one's interested in talking about water. Last resolution is Council Memo 13-20. And this is a resolution that authorizes an amendment to an intergovernmental agreement we have with the Joliet Sanitary District, East Joliet Sanitary District. Presently, the agreement we have governs about 600 homes in terms of wastewater treatment. This amendment does a few things. It renews the agreement for additional 10-year period, but there is a little complexity. Because we're doing changes to some of our sewer lines, changes in grades and upgrading the sewer line in the neighborhood to a larger size is going to require the elimination of service to 14 homes that we presently serve. So the city, through this agreement, is basically making plans where they will come off of our system and basically be served by the East Joliet Sanitary District. That will require $30,800 in tap-on fees. So this agreement covers a number of aspects. Bids and contracts, amendments, change orders, all of these except, I believe, one item for public safety were reviewed tonight and were deemed okay, and certainly we'll hear from public safety tomorrow about turnout here. So that is the end of the agenda.
Next is public comments. Is there anyone that would like to speak under public comments this evening? Seeing none, there is a request for closed session. A motion to go into closed session to discuss personnel, collective bargaining, land acquisition or conveyance pending or threatened litigation, after which the meeting will be adjourned.
So moved.
Second.
Motion seconded to approve. Councilman Dickinson. Aye. Councilwoman Gavin.
Aye.
Councilman Hugg.
Aye.
Councilman Morris.
Aye.
Councilman Mudrin.
Aye.
Councilwoman Coleman.
Aye.
Councilwoman Reardon.
Aye.
Councilman Turk.
Aye.
Motion carried.